Now, the director of the Fox News Decision Desk, managing director of Michigan Associates, Arnon Michigan. Good to have you with us, Arnon.
Thank you for having me.
We have seen a closing, if you will, of the margin in the electoral map.
Yes.
And a widening of Clinton's popular vote lead is measured by your poll.
The Fox News poll does show a 4-point margin. Here's the thing about a 4-point margin. It's great news for Hillary Clinton on one level. It's particularly good news because her number, which had been holding at 45%, went up to 48%. But here's the problem with the number. Number one, whenever we see Hillary Clinton looking like she is very close to winning, people are convinced she's going to win. That dampens the enthusiasm of some of the less enthusiastic people on her side. And it also increases the likelihood that people in the middle, people weighing Trump versus Clinton, are more likely to say, well, Trump's not going to be president, so I don't care about some of the questions that are raised, but I like his issues, so I'm going to vote for him, which is exactly, by the way, what happened in Brexit. And the second thing is Democrats, because of the way the country is cut, run up the score in the populous states of California, New York, Illinois, that they're definitely going to win. We did a calculus yesterday, and roughly 3% of the popular vote, the national popular vote, goes to Democratic wastage in the easiest states for them to carry. That's a net when you compare to the Republicans.
For example, in 2012, the popular vote in California and New York amounted to effectively the margin by which Obama won nationally.
Precisely. And so a 3 or 4 point national margin could translate into an electoral college photo finish.
Photo finish sounds like 2000.
Don't remind me.
Well, if it is indeed a photo finish, what do you think is the most likely, as we stand here right now, the most likely outcome in these East Coast battleground states? And I'm talking particularly about North Carolina and Florida and Pennsylvania.
I think if you put a gun to my head, I would say Florida is going to wind up in Trump's column. I would say that North Carolina, my sense of the early vote is that the Clinton people have done a better job in North Carolina than they did in Florida, and so that they have a really good chance there. Pennsylvania is the unknown, and the other big known in the eastern part of the country is Michigan, which puzzles me. It doesn't puzzle me why Trump is there, because they may think of it as a Hail Mary. It ain't a Hail Mary because Clinton is there, the president is there, and so we know that her polls are saying there's something going on in Michigan. And so that's, to me, is it could be a very interesting thing. So
you're saying that Trump has correctly perceived an opportunity in Michigan?
Yes.
And he has acted on it forthrightly and quickly, and will not only be there over the course of this weekend, but is going to actually wrap up tonight in Michigan. And people are asking, and I have said this hanger approach to campaigning is something brand new for Americans. To see his jet pull up and 20,000 people be awaiting, his words on the issues that matter most to them. But it's proved to be immensely effective, and the ground game that's put up by the GOP, the Republican National Committee, seems to be in place to augment it. But we have heard very little about that. Why is that?
Because it's not clear how big a ground game Trump really has, or the RNC really has, in those states. A ground game is about money, and it's about devoting resources, and we haven't seen that level of resources applied to that. On the other hand, as you point out, Trump clearly has a lot of enthusiastic backers. So the question is, tomorrow we'll learn what's more important, the enthusiasm of the voters or the fact that Clinton does seem to have a solid ground game.
And that enthusiasm there's just no way to quantify it, so it's not reflected in the polls, is it?
Except in the measures of enthusiasm and right. When we ask them, but that's correct.
And failing that, we're just about, hours away from watching one of the doggondest elections, presidential elections, it appears, in the country's history.
Yes.
with that cryptic answer, we're going to go forward. We appreciate it, Arnon. Great to see you. And
thank you, Lou.
It's going to be fun, and I know you've got immense challenges ahead and long.
I think it'll be a late night.
You got it. A long night. You heard it first from Arnon Michigan. Good to have you here. Up next, Donald Trump is calling out Hillary Clinton for her abuse of power. He is urging voters to send him the White House to the White House to clean up Washington.
Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt person ever to seek the office of the presidency of the United States. She sold her office to the highest bidder. She deleted 33,000 emails after receiving a congressional subpoena, and nothing happens to her.
I'll be speaking with Republican strategist Tony Sayegh, Republican pollster Lee Carter about the state of this race, the damaging revelations from WikiLeaks about the corruption of the Clinton campaign, and the issue of character in this race. Stay with us on this election eve in America. Well, we're getting to the good part, aren't we? Election day tomorrow. Everybody's just pretty revved up, I would say, anxious, questioning, wondering what, whether you're for Clinton, whether you are for Trump. It's going to be quite a 36 hours. WikiLeaks today releasing its 33rd batch of emails, bringing the total number to more than 55,000 Podesta emails released. These emails show greater collusion between Democrats and the mainstream left-wing media. CNN colluding on questions for both Trump and Cruz. DNC Research Director Lauren Dillon on the 25th of April sent an email to DNC staffers. The subject, Trump questions for CNN. The email reading, Wolf Blitzer is interviewing Trump on Tuesday ahead of his foreign policy address Wednesday. Please send me thoughts by 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. I mean, are you kidding me? And the interview ultimately was canceled, but Dillon in an email 3 days later said CNN is looking for questions for Ted Cruz. CNN now under fire after previous emails revealed that Democratic National Committee boss and former CNN contributor Donna Brazile gave Hillary debate questions in exact wording in advance. But CNN, not the only member of the media colluding with the Clinton campaign. Oh, no. CNBC's John Harwood emailing Podesta last September about what he should ask Jeb Bush during an interview. Are you kidding me? Harwood appeared frequently in the emails released by WikiLeaks, thanking Podesta for setting up a meeting with Clinton and slamming other reporters for asking about Clinton's email scandal. Shameless of them, wasn't it? My gosh, when they could have been sucking up to Podesta, like Harwood. Harwood even wrote that he felt vindicated in his Republican primary debate questioning of Trump, a performance for which he was widely criticized, mocked, and it's unbelievable what the left-wing media is doing, in particular, folks like Harwood. My God. No pride, no self-respect whatsoever, and certainly I'm concerned about journalistic ethics. Joining me now, political communications expert, partner at Maslansky and Partners, Lee Carter, Republican campaign strategist, Fox News contributor, Tony Sayegh. Thank you both for being here. This is an extraordinary night because we're looking at these polls closing, the electoral maps, as Arnon Michigan was just here talking about the Fox News map. This thing is getting awful tight.
It is awfully tight. And I was just spending all this time looking at the numbers, trying to figure out what's going to happen. And there's some critical states that have turned today. The race is tightening. We have Pennsylvania is now less than 2 points for Clinton. This is something that's absolutely unheard of. Florida has flipped to Donald Trump again. It's gone back and forth. I guess I give away my preference in this race when I laugh like that. But I mean, it is remarkable. It looked like Pennsylvania a little over a week ago was solidly Clinton.
Pennsylvania, Lou, and include Michigan into that. I mean, look where all the big Clinton surrogates are tonight and tomorrow. President Obama, Bill Clinton himself, Hillary Clinton. They're in the state of Michigan. Donald Trump spending a lot of time there as well. He's going to be there tonight. So now you have two humongous electoral scores in Michigan and Pennsylvania, 20 and 18 electoral votes respectively, up for grabs. So when you talk about what does Donald Trump need beyond those critical swing states that we already talk about a lot, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, he could solve a lot of problems winning one of those two states between Pennsylvania and Michigan, and that's why you see the Clinton campaign extremely worried at this 11th hour.
And the Clinton campaign is quick to talk about, well, our ground game is better, this is, all of this. But most people don't realize you're not talking about a lot of incremental points improvement through simply a ground game. What Donald Trump has demonstrated is an immense appeal to the American voter, talking about the values and the goals that matter and the issues that matter most to them. And you're talking about Hillary Clinton, who is, as he says, I mean, it's demonstrable. It is empirical. She is the most corrupt presidential candidate in the modern era of this country.
So she might have ground game. There's no question that she has the infrastructure, the operations, but she doesn't have the message and she doesn't have the hearts of people. When the thing that I am looking at the most is the enthusiasm of supporters, and she has a 10-point deficit in enthusiasm. Enthusiasm, I think, is going to drive people to the polls.
What do you think that's understated? 10 points?
Look, I think when you really look at the deep crosstabs of this election, Hillary Clinton needs a Barack Obama-style turnout from 2012, which was less, by the way, than 2008. She's not getting it. African Americans are turning out by less significantly in North Carolina and Florida, according to early voting. And in Ohio, Lou, she's even almost within single digits of Donald Trump with women. That's not good for her. And young voters. Why do you think the president today, President Obama, is campaigning at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor? They were at University of Pittsburgh today. This is because they're not getting that same millennial enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton that Barack Obama was able to get with his message of hope and change.
Where is enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton? Where is it demonstrable? In what demographic? Amongst what group?
They say
because I don't see it.
The celebrities?
Elites.
Well, elites.
No, elites. The people with vested interest in keeping the status quo support her, which is why when we talk about Michigan and Pennsylvania, think about how Democrats dismissively talk about Donald Trump supporters. They're deplorable. These are undereducated white people. Barack Obama once called this kind of group of people the bitter clingers onto guns and religion. Right. Well, guess where the bitter clingers, deplorables live? Western Pennsylvania and northern Michigan. And guess what? Two states are right on the verge of voting Republican for the first time since 1988. Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Well, let me just say this to all of our college-educated white people or whoever they are. You're demonstrating a certain lack of education. You may have gotten a degree, but if this is where you come down with that college degree, you're not paying attention, or you're not processing, or incapable, or have just horribly tortured values.
And I just also think that it's really important right now when you look at how many people think the system is broken, that Washington, D.C. is broken.
Where would they ever get that idea?
When people think that, how can you vote for Hillary Clinton if that's what you believe? Because she's not going to go down there and fix it. This works to her advantage. And that's one of the things that I hear from voters over and over again. Whether or not they like Donald Trump, they say we need something different down there.
What do you think of a president who stands in front of cameras and says to illegal immigrants, please vote?
Yeah.
And we won't prosecute you. This is absolutely illegal what he's doing. It's immoral, it's unethical, and not a frankly, I didn't see a major mainstream media outlet even deal with the issue of the president.
He also said you must be sexist if you're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, so did Bubba.
And he knows something about that. President Obama is the president that at one point actually bragged about having the most deportations, and now he's encouraging illegal immigrants to vote. Yeah. Look, Lou, the macro dynamics of this election have never changed. It's a change year. People are dissatisfied with the economic direction of this country. They're worried about our national security, and this aligns perfectly for a candidate like Donald Trump. So with this national race now under 5 points, he's within that striking distance to certainly win a pretty significant victory.
Tony, great to have you here. Lee, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Good to see you both.
Thank you.
On Wall Street today, stocks posting the biggest gains in 8 months. Some investors apparently got the idea early that somehow, because Hillary Clinton wasn't going to be prosecuted in the email scandal, that was good for the establishment, and so they got all ginned up. And there we have a 371-point gain in the Dow, and I ask you why. The S&P up 46 points, the Nasdaq up 120 points. All's well with the world when the establishment is happy. Volume on the big board, 3.7 billion shares changing hands. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. A reminder to follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs, like me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. We are not always, well, supportive of the establishment in our politics or our economics. Up next, Donald Trump says momentum is on his side and it will help him break through the blue wall in tomorrow's historic election.
I think we're going to win Michigan. We're going to win Minnesota. We're leading big in Ohio. We're leading in Iowa. We're leading in New Hampshire. We're leading in North Carolina.
No one says North Carolina quite like Donald
or
Trump.
Alabama or China.
He's got them all down. And joining us next, Jason Miller, Donald Trump's senior communications advisor, joining us with the latest from the campaign on the electoral map that will determine the future of America. Stay with us. We have the latest Fox scorecard map on the electoral vote and the path to 270. Numbers are moving now in Trump's direction. Clinton, according to the Fox electoral map, she has 274 projected by Fox, and Trump 215. This is the first time, by the way, in the Fox electoral map that he's been above 200. There are still 49 toss-ups, of course. Arizona, Iowa, Utah have gone from toss-up to actually leaning Republican. North Carolina has gone from leaning Democrat to a toss-up. Wisconsin also moving from leaning Democratic to a toss-up state. Nevada has gone toss-up to Democratic. Can't all go one way. 3 weeks ago, Fox was giving Clinton 307 electoral votes on the map to Trump's 181 with 50 toss-up states. You've seen that shift. That shift is basically from her to him, bringing him again above 200 for the first time. Joining me now, the senior communications advisor to the Trump campaign, Jason Miller. Great to have you here.
Lou, thanks for having me on.
You've got to feel good about much of this, the margin winnowing here, and the opportunity for 270 expanding. Give us the campaign view.
Well, if you and I were sitting here a week ago or 2 weeks ago and said that the entire political universe would be heading into Michigan today, the day before the election, you would have said that we're absolutely crazy. No one would have thought that deep blue Michigan would be where this battleground is. And if not Michigan, that it's also being fought in Pennsylvania, another deep blue state. But that's where the movement is in this race. So Mr. Trump has really shored up the vote in Florida, in North Carolina, Ohio, and Iowa, all key battleground states. 3 of the last 4 polls that have come out of New Hampshire have shown Mr. Trump ahead. The 4th poll had him tied, so we feel good there. We feel pretty good about our efforts in Nevada. That's going to be a very close race. Obviously, it's be tight going into tomorrow into Election Day. And 2 others that have really come on late.
In Nevada.
In Nevada. That'll be a tight one, but we feel good that we can pull it off. Colorado. It's a vote-by-mail state, and Republicans were trailing initially on ballots returned. Just on Friday, Republicans went ahead by 80 votes statewide out of all the ballots that have been returned. Today, we went up by 7,000 votes. So right now, there have been 7,000 more ballots returned in Colorado by Republicans than Democrats. Right. And then Michigan. We're seeing something special happening in Michigan. That's where Mr. Trump and Governor Pence will be finishing up this evening. It's where Secretary Clinton, Bill Clinton, President Obama, all in Michigan today, all in the same area, getting the vote out. And it shows you just how Mr. Trump has changed, not just the issues that we're talking about, but also the states.
Let's start with first Colorado, which is I think a shocker for a lot of people, sort of dismissed as even a potential win for the Republican nominee. Your sense of the opportunity there, your sense of the opportunity in Michigan, because as you say, talk about a competitive state. I mean, both campaigns throwing all of their resources there. Trump wraps up, he and Governor Pence wrap up the evening there tonight.
Well, let me tell you why we're excited about Michigan, and then I'll get into Colorado. So Michigan, it's this trade message that Mr. Trump has been talking about on the campaign trail. You know, it's for folks maybe in the Acela corridor or in different parts of the country might not realize the impact of what happens when Ford jobs pack up and move to Mexico, or when other manufacturing sector jobs leave a state like Michigan. But if you live in Michigan and these jobs are leaving, then this message of renegotiating bad trade deals and bringing back American jobs is a big one. That matters for Republicans, Democrats,
million
white
manufacturing jobs lost in this country. And people talk about it as if there's no impact. And I don't know how much video we have shown on this broadcast alone of factories abandoned, overgrown, and really the enormous economic potential of the country simply rotting in a large number of places in the Midwest, the Rust Belt.
I think there's also a sense of frustration that Democratic leaders have failed to turn Detroit around. That this is a once proud city that still has hundreds of thousands of proud residents who've looked and said, why have we gotten the same failed solutions over and over? And I think that's where Mr. Trump's urban renewal plan has really made an impact there.
We're pressing time. Let's go to Colorado. What do you think your odds are there?
Very good. I'd rather have our odds in Colorado than Secretary Clinton's. I think it's a libertarian-leaning state. I think her anti-energy policies have really hurt her out there. And Mr. Trump has spent a lot of time in Colorado working it. I think that's really paying off.
And his message about her corruption, the corruption of what we on this broadcast call the Clinton cartel, and have for a long time. It's in your face. What is the reaction to the fact that he can offer to drain the swamp, as he puts it? That has to be a strongly appealing message.
Well, it is, and it's one of his strongest messages. You heard people at the rally. He was just out in Pennsylvania where they're chanting "Drain the Swamp," and it's this frustration with, like I said, the corruption and everything in D.C. And keep in mind, even after yesterday's news from Director Comey, the Clinton Foundation is still under investigation.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact is, we don't know what under investigation by the FBI means anymore. Jason Miller, good to have you with us. Good luck.
Sir.
We appreciate you.
We're going to win tomorrow.
Stopping by. Good deal. And up next, Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin. Join me next to discuss new details tonight on how the federal government may intimidate voters tomorrow at the polls. That's right, intimidate us. We're coming right back. Stay with us. Much more ahead. Joining me now, former Reagan White House political director, Great America PAC strategist, Ed Rollins, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Post, Michael Goodwin. Let's start with, we have heard from Arnon, Michigan. We have heard from Jason Miller from the Trump campaign. We've heard from Lee Carter and Tony Sayegh, Republican strategists. This thing is tight. It's getting tighter. And I have to tell you, I'm excited. It's going to be, it looks like, an amazing, thrilling day.
Well, it certainly turned out.
And night.
It certainly turned out much closer than anybody anticipated a couple months ago. And I think at the end of the day, as I always say to you, tell me who's going to vote tomorrow, I'll tell you who's going to win. And we still don't know who's going to vote.
Well, you may not, but I've got it all figured out.
And I think there's a lot of people going to vote. There's a lot of people vote on Election Day. They don't like all this early stuff and what have you. And I think it's going to be a very positive experience for most Americans. And I think Trump's very much in the hunt.
You know, the what have you there. I mean, looking at the 6.4 million voters who've already voted in the state of Florida. We're talking about somewhere around 50 million people will have voted in this country when the polls open tomorrow. Michael, that's amazing. And right now, both North Carolina and Florida are ahead for the Trump organization, ahead of where Romney was against President Obama 4 years ago.
Right. You know, Lou, I was looking at a bunch of polls today because going all the way back to, I think, right after the Republican convention in July was the last time Trump was doing this well in all the polls across the country. So since the Democratic convention, let's say, which followed the Republican convention, he had a greater deficit than he has had in the last couple of days. So he spent a lot of time in the wilderness.
Sort this out for me. What are you really saying?
Well, there's a real surge. I mean, he really has been surging. Yes, and it's been building at just the right time. Now, I must say, I think some of this early voting may work against him because people may have gone to the polls when he was further back in the poll. They went to vote when he was further back, but we won't know that until it's over.
You're trying to figure it all out right here tonight.
I'd like an answer before I leave.
Well, so would I now. Let's turn back to Ed here.
Well, let's hope we have an answer before 2 o'clock in the morning tomorrow night.
Well, it's very possible. Arnon, Michigan was saying basically that we can expect a very long night.
I think because of the states that are in it. I can tell you this. I have a lot of Democrat friends who are in the other camp. They have been very nervous for the last week, 10 days. You can see by where she has gone. Democrat hasn't campaigned in Michigan or Pennsylvania in a long, long time. I mean, we've not won either one of those states since 1988, which is a long, long time ago. So my sense is they wouldn't be bouncing around in these places if and they have much more expensive and more extravagant polling than we have. My sense is they're worried about these spots
Yeah. Well, we've got over 1 million independent or unaffiliated votes amongst the early votes in Florida. No one seems to be able to identify who they are. Some of the latest measures, at least in the Fox News polling, put the number at around breaking about 8% toward Trump. 6% of the most recent poll. Right. I have to believe it has to be much larger than that among independents.
Well, equally as important, what you have in the early, no votes are cast, votes are cast, but they're not counted. So you could have Democrats who are turning out here, voting early, who basically can be voting for him too. The reality is all that you're measuring here is the registered Republicans who go. The votes are not counted until tomorrow.
Well, they're not counted until tomorrow, but obviously all of us want to know the outcome as quickly as possible. And what I have witnessed here on the part of Donald Trump, the energy that he is displaying. Yesterday, 5 rallies. Today, 5 more rallies. Governor Pence sounded like he was thrilled to be able to get to Michigan to join up with Donald Trump so they could do the wrap on this campaign. I mean, it's been he's been in it a relatively short time. Trump's been running since last June. I mean, it's amazing.
And I was struck too, Lou, that yesterday or on Sunday when Comey does his letter.
Oh boy!
The jubilation among the Democrats, the relief is, she's not going to be indicted. Well, that's good enough. Right. That's the only standard. If you're not indicted, you're perfect.
Well, not indicted for emails.
Well, that's right. But I mean, it's just the level that they're operating at is disgraceful.
Well, his statement about 2 things. 1, it's rigged. And 2, drain the swamp. Right. If you don't want to drain that swamp in Washington, D.C., after what you just witnessed yesterday with the Justice Department and the FBI and the Hillary Clinton and the Clinton cartel, what would it take for you to take some notice of the corruption that is the size, the depth, the scope of the swamp that is Washington, D.C.?
Oh, totally agree. I mean, he came to this position. It was always initially what he wanted, but they gave him the opportunity to really go give the examples, and I think the examples have basically brought a lot of people to his side.
Well, and I think, too, just the sense of corruption among the media. I mean, the coordination.
The collusion.
Yeah, so a lot of things have come out during the campaign that have lined up with his idea, with his argument.
Do you remember when he would be talking about the corrupt national liberal media? And people go, oh, my goodness, what's he talking about? Right. Well, we started to learn what he was talking about from the moment John Harwood opened his mouth in the primary debate at CNBC. And then it goes through. It's disgusting. It's appalling.
It really is a form of corruption that I didn't realize it was that bad, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, it's a coziness, and it's the
cozy hell. It's corrupt. I mean, this is well beyond cozy.
Send me questions. Will you read this? I'm a hack. I know I'm a hack, but don't tell anybody.
Glenn Thrush of what organization?
Glenn Thrush, Politico. Yes.
Ed Rollins.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you.
Nice to be with you.
And Michael Goodwin. Nice piece.
Thank you.
In the New York Post. Up next, Donald Trump says there's a clear choice in tomorrow's election between an outsider hell-bent on draining the swamp and an insider hell-bent on hanging on to power.
This election will decide whether we are ruled by a corrupt political class, everybody's watching, or whether we are ruled by the people. That is going to be the choice. Our failed political establishment has delivered nothing but poverty, nothing but losses.
Blaise Angolia, chairman of the Florida Republican Party, joins me here next. We'll be discussing how things are going to shake out in the critical swing state of Florida. What does that early vote mean? And how does it look now for the outcome tomorrow night? Bon Jovi there in Philadelphia, where Hillary Clinton is holding a huge rally tonight. right now, Bon Jovi on stage. 20,000 people, we're told, are in attendance there. It's an extraordinary rally in terms of the big names that are going to be there. We're told Bruce Springsteen will be there with the East Street Band, of course. Will be bringing you the Clinton rally once she takes the stage. Early voting results are in for Florida. Data released by the State Division of Elections now shows roughly half of all registered voters, nearly half, 6.4 million Floridians voted early this year. That's a record number of early voting in the state, eclipsing the 2012 election. These new numbers show Hillary holding a razor-thin 1% lead over Trump. Trump, however, generating incredible enthusiasm at his rally in Sarasota this morning.
In one day, we are going to win the great state of Florida, and we are going to take back the White House. Take it back. Florida's my second home, a state I love so much. And by the way, Hillary, once this is over, she'll never come back to Florida.
Joining me now, the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, Blaise Ingoglia. Good to have you with us. We appreciate it. This is a razor-thin margin, 6.4 million people. I mean, that's astounding. What do you make of the results right now? Are you comforted or are you anxious?
No, I'm actually anxious because I still think that that is a good number for Republicans. That 1% margin translates into about 87,000 votes, and the same time in 2012, we were down 165,000 votes. So we feel good with where we're at, plus also included in those number of Democrats who have voted are a bunch of Democrats in North Florida and in the Panhandle who are very conservative, and they are definitely voting with Mr. Trump.
And Cuban Americans, we have heard anecdotally that there is a movement toward Trump. What do you hear? What can you give us in the way of some indication about how the Cuban American vote is breaking?
Well, we're seeing big numbers of voters coming out, especially in early voting in Miami-Dade, which has a heavy Cuban-American population. But the latest numbers that we're seeing, and we've seen it from a New York Times CNN poll, that they are breaking about 52 to 42 in Trump's favor. And the reason for that is Barack Obama's policy with the normalization of ties with Cuba. And we're seeing them reject the Obama policy, and they know that Clinton is going to carry that on also. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing good numbers coming out of the Cuban-American community.
And the Hispanic community across the state. How is it breaking? It's, I'm told, extraordinarily heavy turnout and likely to be tomorrow. Give us your read on the overall the Hispanic vote in Florida.
Well, overall, we expect to lose when it comes to the Hispanic vote, but I do not think it's going to be as drastic as Hillary Clinton would like it to be, as evidenced by the Cuban-American vote. But also, a lot of these voters, the Hispanic vote, have already come out and voted early and absentee, and they had traditionally voted on Election Day. So all they're doing is they're shifting the way that they vote. I think that come tomorrow, you're going to see about normal numbers of Hispanics. Yes, it will be up a little, but it's nothing that Hillary Clinton should write home about.
Now, we've looked at various polling results, Blaise, from Florida. Give us your best judgment about how you think this is going to go in terms of margin and in favor of whom.
So this is what I believe is going to happen. If we see light to moderate turnout, Donald Trump is going to win the state of Florida. If we see moderate to heavy turnout, hold on to your hats. It's going to be a long week.
Okay. Thanks so much. A long week, he said. Notice that. Not long evening. Blaise Ingoglia, thank you very much, the head of the Republican Party in Florida. Up next here, Donald Trump slamming FBI Director Comey for clearing Hillary Clinton in the email scandal investigation.
The rank-and-file special agents at the FBI won't let her get away with these terrible crimes. Right now, she's being protected by a rigged system. Hillary Clinton is guilty. She knows it. The FBI knows it. The people know it.
The People. Monica Crowley, Byron York join us here next. A lot more straight ahead. Stay with us. Well, one day until the election, you knew that, didn't you? And polls in several key battleground states are very, very tight. In Ohio, Trump is up there 3.5 points. By the way, that looks like a huge margin by comparison to most of the margins in these battleground states. In Pennsylvania, Clinton is up only 2 points. In Nevada, Trump up by 1.5 points in Colorado. Trump up 3 in Michigan, Clinton up 5. Trump and Clinton virtually tied in New Hampshire, and that's where we are as of right now in terms of the averages. The latest polling within those averages suggests an even tighter race. Trump up by 1 point in North Carolina, we should point out. Early voting ended Saturday in North Carolina. 1.3 million Democrats voting early compared to 990,000 Republicans. But, and that sounds bad, but in 2012, President Obama also built an early lead and was trounced by Mitt Romney in that state. So, the big focus tomorrow, of course, who will win the presidency. We'll have the first results for you on the show tomorrow evening. We also will be beginning early at 6 p.m. Eastern time, so please join us. Tonight, we're also following the balance of power in Congress, of course. Right now, Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the U.S. Senate. There are 34 seats up for election. Look at the exposure of the Republicans. They're defending 24 of those 34 seats. 7 of those races are within 2 percentage points. Kelly Ayotte is facing a tough re-election battle in New Hampshire, where an unprecedented about $130 million has been spent on ads and other expenses associated with a Senate race, of course. I mean, it's crazy what's happening there. And Marco Rubio expected to just hold on to his seat in Florida. Republicans have an opportunity to pick up a seat being vacated by the retiring Democratic leader, Harry Reid, in Nevada. The likelihood of Democrats retaking the House are, well, much longer odds. They'd need to win 30 seats. Only about 16 of those seats are considered competitive. And a number of longtime House Republicans facing tough re-election this year, including Darrell Issa in California, John Mica in Florida, and Scott Garrett in New Jersey. Joining us now, Washington Examiner chief political correspondent Byron York. Great to have you here, Byron. And Washington Times online opinion editor Monica Crowley. Great to have you with us, Monica. Both are Fox News contributors. Just talking with the head of the Republican Party in Florida. He feels obviously very good about the prospects. The margin, as we look at these polls, is very, very close.
Yes, and Donald Trump always has the opportunity to say Florida is his second home. He has Mar-a-Lago. He spends a lot of time there. He's got some business there as well. I think he's going to carry Florida. I think it's going to be by a more substantial margin than what we're seeing in these poll numbers. When Florida comes in early, if it in fact does go to Donald Trump, he is in this game.
If it doesn't go to Donald Trump, he loses. I mean, that's all there is to it.
That's correct.
You start with 206 from Mitt Romney. You add 29 to Florida. You're already at 235 right there. So, I mean, Florida is the single biggest prize. Of the 3 that he really has to win, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida is way the biggest.
Way the biggest, and it's unclear to me how successfully Hillary Clinton has been in campaigning there. They've both spent some time, no question, but her connection with Florida, he seems like he would have at least a slight advantage, and he outperformed certainly there in the primaries.
Yes, but Mrs. Clinton, to Byron's point, Mrs. Clinton can win the presidency without Florida. He cannot. So it is a must-win for him. He's spent a great deal of time there, and I do think he's going to pull it out.
But you are hearing a lot of talk about greatly increased Hispanic turnout in early voting, the assumption being that's an anti-Donald Trump vote.
That assumption has been a talking point throughout the day, and I have noticed that in a number of places. But as Blaze pointed out, Ingolea, the head of the GOP in Florida, Blaze points out, you know, Cuban Americans are tilting, and by a strong margin. That does not eliminate a vast number of Puerto Ricans who are living now in Central Florida.
That doesn't take into account the diversity
of the Hispanic vote,
population.
but nothing dramatic as the talking points have.
And actually, I was just hearing some speculation. It looks like Marco Rubio is going to be strong there. And it's possible Marco Rubio could help Donald Trump win Florida, which, when you think back to their primary battle, is just kind of a funny result.
Well, you shouldn't think about the primary battle. It's long gone. It's if you
I
will,
remember
water,
something about
water
finger and
under
all
the
this.
bridge.
It was something, yeah.
I shouldn't have brought up water, should I? But anyway, the prospect in North Carolina have also brightened for the Trump campaign.
Yes.
They've also, according to the Trump people, brightened in Colorado. They've brightened in Michigan. And by the way, apparently that's correct, because Clinton, she is throwing everything she's got into the state. This is a humdinger of an election.
That's because I think anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen tomorrow night has no idea what they're talking about, because this election has the potential to be a realigning election. There are so many cross currents happening, which is why you're seeing the industrial Midwest, the Rust Belt, now in play for Donald Trump, when it hasn't really been in play for Republicans in a very long time.
In play as well, the state of New Hampshire, a battleground indeed and for real, and that is where Donald Trump is holding tonight a rally in the battleground state of New Hampshire. Well, now, this is a lot of fun listening to Governor Pence talk about, you can tell they're feeling pretty good about where they are tonight in this campaign, as are all of the folks at the rally, and they're all awaiting, of course, no offense to Governor Pence, but for the top of the ticket, Donald Trump. I want to bring you guys back into this conversation. He's talking in Michigan. He's talking in New Hampshire. He's talking in Nevada, crisscrossing the country. We haven't seen this kind of energy from a presidential candidate since, I'm going to argue, John F. Kennedy. And it's really remarkable.
I knew he was going to finish in New Hampshire because he has such a feeling for New Hampshire. It was his first really big, his first victory, and it was a really big victory. So I was not at all surprised.
New Hampshire.
Not at all surprised when we found out they were going to close up in New Hampshire, and then they added another rally tonight, I think at 11 p.m. In Michigan, which gives you an idea. They really, really think they can make some progress there.
And if there's a state in this country where his message on the global elites trashing our middle class, which hasn't grown in 30 years, it's been dwindling, that's where the American dream lives. And Michigan is, I just can't even imagine why it was ever a question about whether that message would not work in Michigan.
You know, Donald Trump has done something really smart over the last couple of weeks. He has stayed focused, but he's kept his focus message simple, and he's also kept it consistent with the nation's core values. He's been talking economic populism, which is what's resonating in the industrial Rust Belt, the trade issues, and so on. Job creation, yes. He's been talking about law and order. He's been talking about restoring a strong national defense and defeating the corrupt rigged system, which the Comey-Hamlet-like deliberation over the last 10, 11 days
when you say
has actually helped him.
People are going to shudder.
And you know what's interesting, Lou? Yesterday, when this last Hamlet-like deliberation came from Comey, Mrs. Clinton was out totally energized, and I thought, as a visceral reaction, no, this is going to help Donald Trump, because it feeds right into his core message that the system is in fact corrupt and rigged.
I have been to a Trump rally in Michigan. It was during the primaries, and there's an extra connection there when he talks about Ford taking jobs to Mexico. Obviously, that hits harder in Michigan than anywhere else in the country. The danger for Trump is that that's kind of anecdotal. You know, you go there and the crowd is louder than anywhere else, and they're really intense, so you think, well, they got to love me. And you still look at the polls, and it's a very difficult lift for Trump.
It is, well, the polls now are tied up in the most recent poll. So the lift is eased, at least in the view of one polling organization. We'll find out whether they know what the heck they're talking about. But watching the enthusiasm today, whether it was Sarasota, Florida, I mean, those aren't people cheering. I mean, it's a booming, raucous, rocking assemblage of thousands of people whose energy seems to have only increased over the course of the last couple of weeks.
This has been true for Donald Trump throughout the primaries.
Whether it matters or whether it means anything, we're going to find out tomorrow.
This is not just a new phenomenon. This has been true for Donald Trump for a year and a half since he first announced for president.
I'm talking about the booming nature of this thing. I mean, it was at a level, a decibel level I haven't heard.
And you know what?
And
You know
it
what that
started about
tells
2
me,
weeks
Lou?
ago.
That he has created an emotional bond with voters, which is something that money cannot buy, and that's something that Mrs. Clinton does not have.
You know what else he's done, Byron? He always talks in the first person plural. He talks about us. He talks about we.
Right.
He talks about our.
Yeah.
And we listened to Barack Obama the other day campaigning for Hillary Clinton using the first person 207 times, the first person singular, and it only took him an hour and a half to do it.
You know, that was actually one of Trump's biggest lines in about the middle of the campaign when Hillary Clinton her supporters were saying, I'm with her, and Trump said, I'm with you. It was actually a very, very effective line.
A very effective line and a very effective campaign, it turns out, because after all that he has endured for a year and a half, no billionaire has ever endured more, I assure you, in the way of criticism and some awful, awful tough attacks. Here he is tied up essentially in at election eve. Byron, thank you very much. Monica, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Great to see
Thank
you.
you.
both.
You too.
Up next, Donald Trump says our foreign policy is a mess and needs to be rebuilt from the very foundation.
New foreign policy is going to put America first. Just think about what we can accomplish in the first 100 days of a Trump administration.
Well, one of those watching very closely, of course, is a fellow by the name of Vladimir Putin. KT McFarland, former UN Ambassador John Bolton, well, they watch him. And they join us here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back with much, much more from the campaign trail. I love it. 2016, the decision upon us. Vladimir Putin stepping up provocations ahead of the presidential election. Russia recently putting new cruise missiles into the Baltic territory of Kaliningrad, and Putin's warplanes are constantly flying into NATO airspace along Russia's eastern border. Putin clearly trying to take advantage of end-of-term distractions in the White House or the passivity of a lame duck president, however you would like to structure it. Joining me now, former Pentagon official, member of Trump's National Security Advisory Committee, KT McFarland, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, American Enterprise Institute senior fellow. Both are Fox News contributors and great Americans. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thanks so much. Let's start with Putin and his provocations. They've been unrelenting here. And NATO is not reacting. The UK has, but within certain limits, and the United States, nothing at all. Thank you very much.
Well, no drama. Obama does not want an issue. He's just going to play out the clock. What I'm interested in, though, is why Hillary Clinton's team keeps talking about the Russians and Trump, that Trump is a Russian agent. I think maybe they're setting things up.
Or maybe they've lost their mind.
Well, they may be that
There's
desperate.
possibility.
But what about this theory that they're thinking that if the election is close, they'll challenge all various states saying, aha, it was Russian interference because of the Russian agent, Donald Trump?
Yeah, I don't know. There are times, it happens frequently, that people get so deep that I don't comprehend what's going on. I'm not sure how to follow that. But I do know this, that once she accounts for the $145 million put into the Clinton Foundation and the transfer of 20% U.S. uranium assets to the Russians, effectively and ultimately, then I'll start to worry about the rest of the Russian issues as they pertain, if at all, to the Trump campaign. But that first basic question hasn't even been answered, John.
Yeah. Well, look, this is the Secretary of State who gave the reset button to the Russians. Their failure has been clear throughout the last 8 years. But I have to say, I think we are now moving into the period beginning tomorrow night around midnight, the most dangerous time in the entire Obama administration, after the election but before the inauguration. And I think that's what Putin has in mind. Whatever he has done or may do in the elections, he sees that 2.5-month period, as do many of our adversaries around the world, as their last chance to take advantage of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
You know, John's admonishment here and warning, clear warning, and I think it's perfectly suited and timed, but it harkens us all back to the Cold War. Because
they think
during the Cold War, that would have been a period in which everyone was on top alert. everyone would be, during a lame duck presidency, prepared for the worst.
Well, it won't just be Russia. The Chinese are going to take more of the South and East China Sea. They're going to try to claim it as an internal Chinese lake. Iran is going to get much more aggressive. Its relationship with Iran, Russia, Iraq, Syria, I think that we can assume that there will be a lot of challenges to the United States in various parts of the world by anybody who wants to grab now while the grabbing's good.
And what they grab, I don't really, I'm not sure. I know, obviously, the interests of Russia along the Ukrainian border, and perhaps well beyond that. President Xi in the South China Sea, but it goes well beyond that. We now are watching a game of some sort being played between the Philippines, the leadership of the Philippines certainly, and Beijing. So, I mean, we're looking at some extraordinary challenges potentially. What do you think? What do you think is going to be the first place we're going to see that challenge manifest itself in terms that are going to require a response?
Well, I think you're going to see the new administration, whoever it is who gets elected, tested across the board as well. And if Putin, for example, begins his challenge against a NATO member this time, the Baltic Republics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, not Georgia, not Ukraine, not a non-NATO member, that is an approach that threatens to shatter the NATO alliance.
An alliance, by the way, that I love the fact that Hillary Clinton, is always accusatory toward Donald Trump. But that was an alliance that was ossifying, had been badly enfeebled over the course, basically on energy policy.
Look, anybody who's been through NATO decision-making would not hold that up as an agile, well-led alliance.
To Trump's credit, when he started talking about NATO members have to ante up, the Germans have increased their defense budget.
Yes, and you know what? It didn't take very long for President Obama. As a matter of fact, it was a little over a week. Suddenly we started hearing about some new initiatives on the part of the Americans and the members of NATO. He may not be original, but he is adaptive. Thanks so much.
Well said.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
John Bolton, K.T. McFarland. Up next, Donald Trump again slamming Hillary Clinton for her failures in everything from the economy to border security.
Hillary Clinton is the candidate of yesterday. She's been doing this for 30 years and failing all over the place, folks. Look at what she's done. Everything she touches turns bad.
Coming up, the Weekly Standard's Fred Barnes joins me, as does New York Democrat and Trump supporter Andrew Stein. Yes, I said Democrat. Joining me now, executive editor of the Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor, Fred Barnes. Fred, great to have you on the show tonight. And Democratic politician, former president, Speaker of the New York City Council, former Manhattan Borough president, and Democrat, Andrew Stein. We got him through the building. It was no problem at all, I assure you. Great to have you both with us.
Thanks, Lou.
Let's start with these polls. One day before the election, Fox News poll has a 4-point margin for Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, the Investor Business Daily tracking poll has Trump up by 2 points. Others have it close as well, and some more distant. Fred, your thoughts? It looks like he couldn't ask to be much closer to make this a great contest tomorrow at the ballot box.
Yeah, and that national poll, look, it's accurate for what it's worth. It's just not worth much. We need to look to states. You know how our elections work.
Just
the Electoral College
is, people are thanking you.
Yeah, the Electoral College is not elected nationally; it's elected state by state, and so Trump has a formula. It's been described as a narrow formula, a narrow path. I think it's a pretty wide path. Yeah, win the Romney states, win Ohio, win Florida. Now, Ohio looks pretty good. Florida, I think Trump will win, but it's closer in polls. And then there's Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's a remarkable state because Republicans have tried so hard to win there in presidential races and haven't recently. Right. But Trump is a different candidate who appeals all over the state except for Philadelphia. And we'll see how the Philadelphia vote turns out. There are a lot of Rick Santorum, who's from Pennsylvania and elected there statewide a number of times, thinks it will surprise people. The Philadelphia vote will be higher for Trump than the Republican vote normally is. I agree.
That's interesting. And Andrew, a lot of your friends in the Democratic Party are over there tonight partying with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and of course Mr. and Mrs. Obama are there. The president is there. This is a lot of firepower, plus Bon Jovi and it's a pretty good A-list party, but they're in Philadelphia. What does that mean about the vulnerability of the Democratic Party and the nominee in Pennsylvania, as Fred is suggesting?
Well, I think the reason that the whole Democratic mafia is in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia is because they see what others see, which is that Donald Trump is going to win Pennsylvania. I think that the Reagan Democrats, the working class people, see a 53% increase in their premiums in Obamacare. They look at Hillary's record, and there's no place, Lou, in the world that you can say was better after Hillary left. I mean, every place is a disaster. And so I think Donald's going to win Pennsylvania.
Fred, what do you think?
I think if he wins Pennsylvania, he's going to be president. One of the nice things about Pennsylvania is they don't have all that early voting. Voters have to show up tomorrow. The way it used to be. I was reading about the Reagan campaign in 1980 against Jimmy Carter. Right. There was no early voting then. What a bad idea. Yeah. And so Pennsylvania doesn't have it, and we'll see. There's tremendous Trump support everywhere around the state, and I've talked to a lot of people about this around the state, except Philadelphia and the suburbs. Now, do you think the Republican Party has closed ranks now sufficiently behind the nominee to take him over the top? Your best judgment? Well, they've gotten a lot. You see Gary Johnson, the libertarian, his numbers have shrunk. They've obviously gone to Trump. I think he's awfully close. Maybe not quite there, but we're going to find out tomorrow. He's certainly done a lot better just in the last couple of weeks among Republicans. All right. A lot of them have come home. And among Democrats? Well, he'd already done well among Democrats. They didn't have to come home. I think he'd done. Let the Democrats speak to that, Fred. I mean, you can't answer all the questions.
Well,
I can try.
I was a Democratic office holder, Lou, as you mentioned, my introduction for 25 years, and a lifetime Democrat. Bobby and Jack Kennedy, my heroes, and so forth. So I think that there's going to be a lot of Democrats who are going to vote for Trump, because I think that they want growth, they want jobs. I think a lot of the millennials who people assume are going to go for Hillary because they can't find jobs when they get out of school are going to go for Donald as well. All right. Well, we're going to find out. Go ahead, Fred. Yep. Well, I didn't ask a question, but you're going to get to answer this one even without the question. How many of these people that Andrew Stein's talking about and Trump is appealing to, how many do you think were helped by that big advance on the stock market today? I don't think many were helped by it. The 1% were, and Hillary Clinton, they responded that way because they think Hillary Clinton's going to win. Fred, you sound like a populist. I'm proud of you. Fred Barnes, economic populist. Great to have you with us, Fred. Thanks so much. Andrew, great to have you. Thank you, Lou.
Thanks so much. Joining me now, Donald Trump surrogate, founder of the Harvest Praise and Worship Center. Yes, you recognize him. Pastor Mark Burns, great to have you here.
So good to be here, Lou.
I was talking with some friends about you the other day and talking about the energy that you bring, and just absolutely electric energy to politics in the form of stepping up for Donald Trump. How do you feel tonight on the eve of the election?
We're going to win. I'm 100% confident that the American people is going to vote Donald Trump. He's going to reach that 270. Evangelicals, people of faith in this country, we're going to rise up together. And we're going to make sure that the one candidate that is not for abortion, the one candidate that is for overturning the Johnson Amendment, the one candidate that will choose Supreme Court justices that
the Johnson Amendment.
The Johnson
religion
Amendment.
back in the public square, where it belongs.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the foundations
where it's most desperately needed.
Absolutely. You see the state of our country we're in right now. This is America when you try to take God out of it. ISIS tries to kill us. You bring God back, ISIS dies.
Yeah, and you know, public corruption would be at least they might go underground with it instead of put it in our faces if they're going to be corrupt in Washington, D.C. If we had more
without question
men and women of faith in the public square.
Lou, men and women of faith have left politics because they felt politics is so corrupt. But the fact of the matter is politics is so corrupt because men and women of faith have left politics. We got to get back involved. We got to vote our faith.
You know, it's true. As a matter of fact, the minister of the church that I go to was talking about the fact, you know, people saying, well, he's a sinner, so we better shun him. Sinners are the people you got to go to, at least
Absolutely.
in the ministry.
I mean, it's so baffling to me. Either the word of God works for all of us, including Donald Trump, or it works for none of us.
Yeah, it's so. You're awful proud of him. I know that for a fact. And he is now headed from Manchester, New Hampshire. He's going to head out to Michigan. How do you feel about the prospects for his candidacy tomorrow?
Well, again, I'm 100% confident that America is going to turn out. I mean, this is our time. This is the moment where America is going to rise up together. We're going to take the presidency tomorrow.
Pastor Mark Burns, I'm going to have to say thank you. We're going to turn to former President Bill Clinton. We've been waiting for him forever, and we are delighted to see you. And thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again soon. Good luck tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
President Obama warming up the crowd by in preparation to introduce Hillary Clinton, of course, by first, taking on the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, who I might add has stepped to the podium in New Hampshire and has been talking with a number of people, his daughter Ivanka, Governor Pence behind him as they are getting ready for another rally with the nominee, as you see, Donald Trump there on the stage. We're going to be going here in the next hour to Trish Regan. She will pick up our coverage of what is an extraordinary night of rallies and all sorts of goings on in New Hampshire, where the nominee from which he will travel, Donald Trump, to Michigan. For another state that is now a battleground state. In the most recent polls, they are tied up. It's been a wondrous day, this eve of the 2016 election. It's upon us. The decision is, to me, starkly, brightly clear, the contrast sharp and defined. And I think probably for millions of Americans, we're arriving at that point all at the same time. Our special extended election coverage continues now with Trish Regan.